The encounter. Ethan Parker sat hunched against the cold brick wall of an abandoned building, the biting wind cutting through his thin jacket like a knife. The city around him was alive with noise, cars honking, people chatting, and the distant sound of music from a nearby cafe, but he felt like an invisible ghost haunting the fringes of society. At 38, he had experienced more than most. Life had taken him from being a promising artist to living on the streets after a series of unfortunate events. As he rummaged through his meager belongings, a tattered backpack filled with old clothes and sketchbooks, his stomach growled in protest. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and the gnawing hunger was becoming unbearable. He glanced at the busy street corner where pedestrians rushed by without sparing him a glance, their lives seemingly untouched by the harsh realities he faced daily. Ethan had learned to adapt to this new existence, but it didn't come without its scars. Memories of better days haunted him, days filled with laughter in art galleries and evenings spent painting under the stars with friends who had long since moved on. A deep sense of loss settled in his chest like a heavy stone as he thought about how quickly everything had spiraled out of control after losing his job and then his home. Just as despair threatened to engulf him once more, a faint sound caught his attention, a soft whimpering coming from an alleyway nearby. Curiosity piqued, Ethan pushed himself off the ground, wincing as pain shot through his joints from sleeping on the cold pavement. He shuffled toward the sound, peering into the dimly lit alley. What he saw made his heart ache. A small dog lay curled up against the wall, its fur matted and dirty, ribs protruding sharply against its thin frame. The animal looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes that seemed to reflect his own pain and loneliness. Without thinking, Ethan knelt down slowly so as not to frighten it further. "Hey there," he whispered gently, extending a hand cautiously toward the trembling creature. "You look like you could use some help." The dog flinched at first but then cautiously approached him, sniffing at his outstretched fingers. Ethan's heart swelled with compassion as he realized this little being was just as lost as he was, abandoned and starving in this unforgiving world. "Let's see what I can do for you," Ethan said softly, reaching into his backpack for anything edible he might have left. He found an old granola bar that had seen better days but was still intact. Breaking off a piece, he offered it to the dog. To his relief, the dog hesitated for only a moment before snatching it from his hand and devouring it hungrily. Watching it eat brought tears to Ethan's eyes. This small act of kindness felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Do you have a name?" he asked quietly as if expecting an answer from the creature before him. "How about Rusty? You look like a Rusty." The dog paused mid-chew and looked up at him with those soulful eyes as if considering its new identity. Ethan chuckled softly, it felt good to laugh again even if just for a moment. As night began to fall over the city, casting long shadows across the alleyway, Ethan knew he couldn't leave Rusty behind. He felt an inexplicable connection to this animal, a bond forged in shared suffering. "Come on," he said gently, standing up and beckoning Rusty to follow him back to his makeshift home, a small tent tucked away behind some dumpsters where he sought refuge each night from the biting cold. Rusty limped after him, each step appearing painful but determined nonetheless. As they reached Ethan's tent, he held open the flap for Rusty to enter first. The dog hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside cautiously. Ethan settled down beside Rusty on the thin sleeping bag spread out on the ground. For the first time in what felt like ages, he didn't feel entirely alone. There was warmth beside him, a flicker of hope ignited by their unexpected meeting. "Good night, Rusty," Ethan murmured as he closed his eyes, allowing exhaustion to pull him into sleep filled with dreams of companionship instead of solitude. Little did they both know that this chance encounter would set them on a path neither could have imagined, a journey toward healing and redemption that would change their lives forever. Building a bond. The sun rose slowly over the city, casting a warm golden hue across the skyline. Samuel stirred awake to the soft sound of Shadow's gentle breathing beside him. The previous night felt like a dream, a fleeting moment of connection that had sparked something deep within him. As he opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of Shadow curled up, his thin body rising and falling rhythmically. Samuel smiled softly, feeling a warmth in his chest that had long been absent. "Good morning, Shadow," he whispered, reaching out to scratch behind the dog's ears. Shadow stirred slightly but remained nestled against Samuel's side, soaking in the affection. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to both of them, two souls finding solace in each other's presence. After a quick breakfast of stale bread he had scavenged from a nearby bakery, Samuel decided it was time to venture out into the city with Shadow by his side. He felt an unfamiliar sense of purpose as he gathered his belongings and prepared for the day ahead. The bond between them was still new, but it filled him with hope, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. As they walked through the bustling streets, Samuel noticed how people reacted differently to him now that he had Shadow with him. Some passers-by offered smiles or kind words, their eyes softening at the sight of the scruffy dog trotting alongside his owner. It was a stark contrast to the usual indifference Samuel faced on a daily basis. "Maybe having you around is a good luck charm," he chuckled as they made their way to their usual spot near the busy intersection. Samuel settled down on the pavement with his cardboard sign, while Shadow lay down beside him, resting his head on Samuel's knee. "Hungry and homeless," Samuel read aloud from his sign. "Any help appreciated." He glanced at Shadow, who looked up at him with trusting eyes. "Well, buddy, let's see if we can get some food today." Hours passed as they waited for passers-by to drop coins into Samuel's cup. He shared bits of food with Shadow whenever someone offered scraps, fragments of sandwiches or half-eaten snacks that would have otherwise gone to waste. With each morsel shared between them, their bond deepened. As evening approached, Samuel felt a sense of accomplishment. They had managed to gather enough for a decent meal. He decided to treat himself and Shadow to something special, a visit to a nearby food truck known for its delicious tacos. The thought of warm food made his stomach rumble in anticipation. When they arrived at the food truck, the aroma of seasoned meat and fresh tortillas filled the air. Samuel approached the vendor with hope in his heart. "Can I get 2 tacos?" he asked, pulling out a few coins from his pocket. The vendor looked down at Shadow and smiled warmly. "Sure thing. You got yourself quite the companion there." Samuel nodded appreciatively as he handed over the coins and received 2 steaming tacos in return. He settled down on a nearby bench, sharing 1 taco with Shadow while savoring every bite himself. "This is good," he said between mouthfuls, glancing down at Shadow who was happily munching away at his share. "I could get used to this." After finishing their meal, Samuel felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over him. He had not only fed himself but had also cared for another living being, something that felt incredibly rewarding after years of neglecting his own needs. As they made their way back to their tent that night, Samuel reflected on how much had changed since Shadow entered his life. The dog had rekindled something within him, a spark of hope that had been extinguished by grief and despair. "Tomorrow," he said softly as they reached their tent, "I'll take you for a walk in the park." Shadow wagged his tail slightly at this idea, as if understanding every word. That night, as they settled into their makeshift home once more, Samuel felt an unshakable bond forming between them, a shared understanding of loss and survival that transcended words. With Shadow curled up beside him, he closed his eyes and drifted off into a peaceful sleep for the first time in years. The next morning brought new possibilities as they ventured out into the city together once again. Samuel found himself smiling more often, at strangers who offered kind words or even just glanced their way with compassion. It was as if Shadow had opened doors that had long been closed. As they walked through the park later that day, Samuel watched as children played and families enjoyed picnics on the grass. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what life might have been like if things had turned out differently, if Marie and the kids were there with him instead of just memories haunting him like shadows. "Do you think they'd be proud of me?" he asked Shadow quietly as they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond where ducks paddled lazily across the water's surface. Shadow looked up at him with those soulful eyes again, and Samuel felt an overwhelming sense of comfort wash over him. "Yeah," he whispered with conviction. "I think they would." As days turned into weeks, their routine solidified, begging during the day and sharing meals together at night under the stars. Samuel began sketching again during moments of quiet reflection, using whatever scrap paper he could find to capture fleeting glimpses of life around him, the laughter of children in the park or couples enjoying each other's company. Shadow became more than just a companion, he became an inspiration, a muse that reignited Samuel's passion for art and storytelling. Each drawing served as both an escape from reality and a tribute to everything he had lost. One evening while sitting outside their tent after dinner, Samuel noticed something unusual happening nearby, a commotion among a group of people gathered around a luxury car parked just down the street. Curiosity piqued, he leaned forward to get a better look. A well-dressed man stepped out from one of the cars, a sharp suit tailored perfectly to fit him, and began speaking animatedly with someone else who appeared equally affluent. They gestured toward various tents set up along the street where homeless individuals sought shelter for the night. Samuel's heart raced as he watched. There was something about this scene that felt significant, like it was building toward something monumental that could change everything for him and others like him. He turned to Shadow, who seemed equally intrigued by what was unfolding before them. "What do you think is going on?" Samuel asked softly. Just then, one of the men broke away from the group and started walking toward them, his eyes scanning each tent along the way until landing on Samuel's makeshift home. Samuel held his breath, uncertainty coursed through him like electricity as this stranger approached closer than anyone else ever had since becoming homeless. "Excuse me," said the man in an authoritative yet friendly tone when he reached them. "I couldn't help but notice your dog here." Samuel blinked in surprise but managed to respond cautiously, "Yeah, this is Shadow." The man knelt down beside them and extended his hand toward Shadow, who sniffed curiously before leaning into his touch, a gesture that surprised both Samuel and himself. "I'm Mark," said the man with an easy smile that radiated warmth despite their surroundings filled with hardship and despair. "I run a local charity focused on helping those in need." Samuel felt hope flicker within him again. Could this be what fate had been leading them toward all along? A twist of fate. The morning sun peeked through the thin fabric of Samuel's tent, casting a soft glow that filtered into his makeshift home. He stirred awake, feeling the warmth of Shadow curled up beside him. The dog had become a comforting presence in his life, and Samuel found solace in their shared companionship. As he sat up, he looked down at Shadow, who was still asleep, his chest rising and falling gently. "Good morning, buddy," Samuel whispered, reaching down to scratch behind Shadow's ears. The dog stirred, opening one eye lazily before stretching and yawning. Samuel couldn't help but smile. It felt good to have someone to share these quiet moments with. After a quick breakfast of some leftover bread he had saved from the previous day, Samuel decided it was time to head out into the city again. He felt a renewed sense of purpose as he gathered his belongings and prepared for the day ahead. With Shadow by his side, he ventured out into the bustling streets, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they walked through the park, Samuel noticed how people reacted differently to him now that he had Shadow with him. Children pointed and laughed at the sight of the scruffy dog, while adults offered kind smiles and nods of acknowledgement. It was a small change, but it made a world of difference to Samuel. He felt less invisible. "Maybe we should try to find some work today," he said to Shadow as they strolled along the path lined with trees. "I've got some skills, I used to be a carpenter." Shadow wagged his tail, as if encouraging Samuel's hopes. They continued their walk until they reached a local cafe that had outdoor seating. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, and Samuel's stomach growled at the thought of something warm to drink. "Let's see if we can find some change," he suggested, settling down on a bench near the cafe's entrance. He placed his cardboard sign beside him and waited for passers-by to notice them. As the minutes ticked by, Samuel felt a mix of hope and anxiety. He had been struggling for so long that it was hard to believe things could change for him. But with Shadow by his side, he felt a flicker of optimism, a belief that maybe today would be different. Suddenly, a woman in her early 30s approached them. She wore a bright yellow dress that contrasted sharply with the gray surroundings of the city. Her long hair flowed freely as she walked with an air of confidence. "Hi there," she said cheerfully as she stopped in front of Samuel and Shadow. "What's your dog's name?" "Shadow," Samuel replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. "He's been my companion for a little while now." The woman knelt down to pet Shadow, who responded with an eager wag of his tail. "He's adorable. You're lucky to have each other," she said warmly. "Yeah, we've been through a lot together," Samuel replied, feeling an unexpected sense of pride in their bond. "I'm Clara," she introduced herself. "I run a local charity that helps people experiencing homelessness find jobs and housing." Samuel's heart raced at her words. This was exactly what he needed, an opportunity to turn his life around. "Really? That sounds amazing," he said cautiously, unsure if this was too good to be true. Clara nodded enthusiastically. "We help with job training and provide resources for those who want to get back on their feet. Would you be interested?" Samuel swallowed hard. The prospect of change filled him with both excitement and fear. I used to be a carpenter," he admitted hesitantly. "That's fantastic. We could definitely use someone with your skills," Clara replied, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "If you're interested, I can give you more information about our program." As they spoke, Samuel felt hope blossoming within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. This chance encounter could be the turning point he had been waiting for. "I'd love to learn more," he said earnestly. Clara smiled brightly and handed him a small card with her contact information printed on it. "Call me when you're ready. We have orientation sessions every Wednesday." Samuel took the card gingerly, feeling its weight in his hand like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Thank you so much," he said sincerely. Clara stood up and waved goodbye as she continued on her way. As she walked away, Samuel glanced down at Shadow, who looked up at him expectantly. "Well, what do you think?" Samuel asked excitedly. "This could be our chance." Shadow tilted his head slightly as if trying to understand the gravity of what had just happened. With renewed determination, Samuel spent the rest of the day collecting coins from passers-by while contemplating how he would approach this new opportunity. He knew it wouldn't be easy, there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt like there was hope on the horizon. As night fell over the city once again, Samuel returned to his tent with Shadow by his side. They settled down together under the stars. This time there was an air of anticipation rather than despair hanging over them. "Tomorrow is going to be different," Samuel murmured as he stroked Shadow's fur gently. "We're going to take that first step toward rebuilding our lives." With those hopeful thoughts swirling in his mind, he closed his eyes and drifted off into sleep, dreaming not just of survival but of a future filled with possibility and purpose alongside his loyal companion. The next morning arrived with an urgency that propelled Samuel out of bed earlier than usual. He felt invigorated by Clara's visit and couldn't shake off the feeling that today could mark a significant change in their lives. After breakfasting on some leftover bread again, Samuel decided it was time to make preparations for orientation at Clara's charity organization later that week. He knew he needed clean clothes and perhaps even some supplies if he wanted to make a good impression. With Shadow trotting alongside him eagerly as they ventured through familiar streets toward a nearby community center known for offering free clothing donations and resources for those in need. Upon arriving at the center, they were greeted by friendly volunteers who recognized Samuel from previous visits, people who understood that everyone deserved compassion regardless of their circumstances. "Hey there. Good to see you again," one volunteer exclaimed while sorting through piles of clothing donations. "I'm looking for something presentable for an orientation meeting," Samuel explained sheepishly as Shadow sniffed around curiously at all the new scents surrounding them. The volunteer nodded understandingly and led him toward racks filled with various clothing options suitable for job interviews or community events, a stark contrast from what Samuel had worn during his time on the streets. After selecting a pair of clean pants and a button-up shirt that fit reasonably well despite being slightly worn out from previous use, Samuel felt a renewed sense of hope wash over him as he looked in the mirror, reflecting back someone who resembled himself before life took such drastic turns away from normalcy. With new clothes in hand along with some hygiene products offered by generous donors, Samuel left feeling lighter than air, his spirits buoyed by kindness shown towards him during this difficult journey toward recovery alongside Shadow, who happily wagged his tail beside him throughout their adventure together today. As they made their way back towards their tent, Samuel couldn't help but feel grateful for everything unfolding around them lately. It seemed almost surreal how quickly things were changing after meeting Clara just days ago. That evening, while sitting outside their tent sharing scraps from dinner, Samuel began sketching again using one of those old notebooks filled previously only with memories lost over time, now transformed into pages filled once more with hope inspired by newfound possibilities ahead. He drew images depicting himself standing proudly alongside Shadow, both ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead together. Each stroke brought forth feelings long buried deep within himself, a reminder that even amidst darkness light could still shine through if given half a chance. As night fell upon them once more, the city transformed into an entirely different place, illuminated by bright lights twinkling against darkened skies above, a reminder that beauty still existed even amid hardship faced daily. With thoughts swirling around possibilities yet unseen, Samuel closed his eyes, drifting off into sleep, dreaming not just about surviving but thriving alongside loyal companion named Shadow, whose presence alone ignited flames within heart once thought extinguished forevermore. The challenge. The sun rose over the city, casting a warm glow that filtered through the thin fabric of Samuel's tent. He stirred awake, feeling Shadow curled up beside him, their newfound bond providing a sense of comfort that had been absent in his life for far too long. As he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, he couldn't help but smile at the sight of the scruffy dog, who had quickly become his loyal companion. "Good morning, Shadow," Samuel said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. Shadow responded with a wag of his tail, his eyes brightening at the sound of Samuel's voice. It was a small moment, but it filled Samuel with hope, a feeling he thought had long since faded from his life. After a quick breakfast of some leftover bread and a few scraps he had saved from the previous day, Samuel decided it was time to take on the challenge of finding work. Clara's offer still lingered in his mind, and he knew that if he wanted to change his circumstances, he needed to take that first step. "Let's go see what we can find today," he said to Shadow as they emerged from their tent. The city was alive with activity, people rushing to work, cars honking, and the distant sounds of laughter and chatter filling the air. For a moment, Samuel felt overwhelmed by it all. The bustling environment reminded him of everything he had lost. As they made their way through the streets, Samuel tried to focus on the present rather than dwelling on memories that threatened to pull him back into despair. He noticed how people reacted to him differently now that he had Shadow by his side. Some offered kind smiles or gentle pats on the dog's head as they passed by. "Maybe having you around really is good luck," he chuckled softly to Shadow. The dog wagged his tail in response, seemingly understanding every word. They arrived at a community center where Clara's charity was located. Samuel hesitated outside for a moment, anxiety bubbling up within him. What if they didn't accept him? What if they saw him as just another homeless man without any skills? But as he looked down at Shadow, who was gazing up at him with unwavering loyalty, Samuel felt a surge of determination. With a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth of the building enveloped him like a comforting embrace. Clara was at the front desk, her smile brightening when she saw him. "Samuel. I'm so glad you came," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Hi, Clara," he replied nervously. "I wanted to learn more about your program." "Of course. We have an orientation session starting in just a few minutes," she said, gesturing for him to follow her. "And I see you brought your friend." Shadow trotted beside Samuel as they walked through the bustling center filled with people seeking help and support. Clara led them into a large room where several others were already seated, some familiar faces from previous visits and others new. "Welcome everyone," Clara began as she stood at the front of the room. "Today we're going to discuss our job training program and how we can help you get back on your feet." As she spoke about the resources available, resume writing workshops, interview preparation sessions, and connections to local employers, Samuel felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. This could be his chance to reclaim his life. After the presentation ended, Clara invited everyone to ask questions or share their stories. When it was Samuel's turn to speak, he felt a knot form in his stomach. I used to be a carpenter," he said hesitantly. "But after losing my family and becoming homeless, I don't know if anyone would want to hire me." Clara nodded empathetically. "It's understandable to feel that way, but remember that everyone here has faced challenges. We're here to help you rebuild your confidence and skills." As others shared their stories, tales of loss, addiction, and resilience, Samuel felt a sense of camaraderie forming among them. They were all fighting their own battles but were united in their desire for change. Afterward, Clara approached Samuel again with an encouraging smile. "I know you have skills as a carpenter. We have connections with local businesses looking for workers like you. Would you be open to attending an interview next week?" Samuel's heart raced at her words. This opportunity could be exactly what he needed to turn his life around. "Yes. I'd love that," he replied eagerly. "Great. We'll prepare you for it during our workshops," Clara assured him before glancing down at Shadow, who had settled comfortably at Samuel's feet. "And don't worry about your dog, we're pet-friendly here." Feeling lighter than air after their conversation with Clara, Samuel left the community center with renewed hope coursing through his veins. He had taken that crucial first step toward rebuilding his life, a step made easier by Shadow's unwavering presence beside him. However, as they made their way back through the city streets later that evening, Samuel couldn't shake off feelings of doubt creeping into his mind once more. What if things didn't go as planned? What if he failed again? "Hey," he said softly to Shadow as they paused near a park bench under the glow of streetlights illuminating their path homeward. "Do you think I can do this?" Shadow looked up at him with those soulful eyes as if trying to reassure him without words, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. That night, after returning to their tent and sharing dinner beneath twinkling stars overhead, Samuel found himself sketching once more in his battered notebook filled with memories lost over time, now transformed into pages filled once more with hope inspired by newfound possibilities ahead. He drew images depicting himself standing proudly alongside Shadow, both ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead together. Each stroke brought forth feelings long buried deep within himself, a reminder that even amidst darkness light could still shine through if given half a chance. As sleep began to claim him once more, Samuel closed his eyes, drifting off into dreams filled not just with survival but thriving alongside loyal companion named Shadow, whose presence alone ignited flames within heart once thought extinguished forevermore. But little did Samuel know that challenges awaited them both, not just in terms of finding work but also navigating through obstacles presented by society itself, which often viewed those experiencing homelessness through judgmental lenses clouded by prejudice and misunderstanding. The following days brought new lessons for both Samuel and Shadow as they navigated this unfamiliar territory together, attending workshops designed not only to equip them with skills necessary for employment but also fostering connections among others who shared similar experiences along this arduous journey toward redemption. Redemption and new beginnings. The dawn broke with a gentle light, illuminating the city streets where Samuel and Shadow had spent another night together. As Samuel stirred awake, he felt the warmth of Shadow pressed against him, a comforting reminder that he was no longer alone in this harsh world. The bond they had formed over the past few days had become a source of strength for both of them, and Samuel could feel the weight of his grief beginning to lift. "Good morning, Shadow," he said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. Shadow responded with a happy wag of his tail, his eyes bright with anticipation for the day ahead. Samuel smiled at the sight. It was as if Shadow understood that they were both on a journey toward healing. After a quick breakfast of stale bread and some water from a nearby fountain, Samuel decided it was time to take action. Clara's offer of help still lingered in his mind, and he knew he needed to prepare for the upcoming job interview. With Shadow by his side, he set out to gather supplies and get ready for whatever lay ahead. As they walked through the city streets, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. He stopped by a local thrift store to look for a more suitable outfit for the interview. The store was filled with second-hand clothes, but Samuel felt hopeful as he rummaged through the racks. "Let's find you something nice," he said to Shadow, who watched patiently as Samuel sifted through various options. After some searching, he found a clean button-up shirt and a pair of slacks that fit reasonably well. "This will do," he said with satisfaction. With his new clothes in hand, they headed back toward the community center where Clara's charity was located. The closer they got, the more anxious Samuel became. What if he didn't make a good impression? What if they saw him as just another homeless man? But as he looked down at Shadow, who trotted beside him with unwavering loyalty, Samuel felt a surge of determination. Upon arriving at the community center, Clara greeted him with her usual warmth. "Samuel, you look great," she exclaimed when she saw him in his new outfit. "Thanks," he replied sheepishly. "I'm just trying to make a good impression." "You're doing just fine," Clara assured him. "Today we'll go over some interview tips and practice answering common questions." As they settled into the workshop room filled with others preparing for their own interviews, Samuel felt an overwhelming sense of camaraderie among them. They were all there for the same reason, to seek change and reclaim their lives. Clara led them through various exercises designed to boost their confidence and help them present themselves effectively during interviews. Samuel listened intently as she offered advice on body language, eye contact, and how to articulate their skills clearly. When it was time for mock interviews, Clara paired Samuel with another participant named Lisa, a young woman with bright blue hair and an infectious smile. As they took turns asking each other questions, Samuel began to feel more at ease. "What skills do you have?" Lisa asked during her turn. "I used to be a carpenter," Samuel replied proudly. "I worked on various construction projects before everything changed." "That's amazing!" Lisa exclaimed genuinely. "You have valuable skills that many employers would appreciate." As they continued practicing together, Samuel found himself opening up about his past, sharing stories about his family and how much he missed them. Lisa listened attentively, offering encouragement and understanding. After several rounds of practice interviews, Clara gathered everyone together again to provide feedback. "You all did wonderfully. Remember that your past doesn't define you, it's how you move forward that matters." As the session wrapped up, Clara approached Samuel once more. "I have some good news. I reached out to a local construction company looking for workers with carpentry skills. They're interested in meeting you for an interview next week." Samuel's heart raced at her words. This could be the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to rebuild his life and honor the memory of his family by working hard again. "Thank you so much," he replied earnestly, feeling gratitude wash over him like a wave. After leaving the community center that day, Samuel felt lighter than air, his spirits buoyed by newfound hope and purpose. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, finding stable housing and securing employment would take time and effort, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. As evening approached and they returned to their tent under the stars, Samuel reflected on how far he had come since meeting Shadow just days ago. The dog had reignited something within him, a spark of hope that had been extinguished by grief and despair. "Tomorrow we'll keep working hard," Samuel said softly to Shadow as they settled down together for the night. "We'll face whatever comes our way." With those hopeful thoughts swirling in his mind, he closed his eyes and drifted off into sleep, dreaming not just of survival but of thriving alongside his loyal companion whose presence alone ignited flames within his heart once thought extinguished forevermore. The following week brought both excitement and anxiety as Samuel prepared for his interview at the construction company. He spent hours practicing answers to potential questions while ensuring Shadow remained by his side, his constant source of support throughout this journey toward redemption. On the day of the interview, Samuel donned his best outfit, the clean button-up shirt and slacks, and took a deep breath before stepping out into the bustling city once more. With Shadow trotting beside him confidently like an unwavering guardian, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Upon arriving at the construction company's office, a modest building filled with workers bustling about, Samuel felt his nerves begin to creep back in again but pushed them aside determinedly. He approached reception where an assistant greeted him warmly, directing him toward an interview room further inside. As he waited nervously outside, Samuel glanced down at Shadow, who seemed equally aware of how significant this moment was. The dog looked up at him expectantly as if sensing every ounce of anxiety radiating off its owner. Finally, the door opened, revealing a middle-aged man wearing glasses who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, the hiring manager. "Samuel Johnson?" Mr. Thompson asked, looking over some notes before extending his hand toward him. "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, firmly shaking Mr. Thompson's hand, feeling reassured by this simple gesture. "Please take a seat." Mr. Thompson gestured toward one across from him while glancing briefly at Shadow, who remained quietly beside Samuel throughout this entire process. Once seated, Mr. Thompson began asking questions about Samuel's previous experience as well as what motivated him during difficult times. With each question asked, Samuel found himself growing more comfortable discussing not only carpentry skills but also sharing stories about family memories that fueled ambition deep within himself. The conversation flowed naturally between them, with Mr. Thompson nodding along thoughtfully while taking notes. It wasn't long before they reached discussions surrounding potential start dates should everything go well. After what felt like hours but was only about 30 minutes, the interview concluded with Mr. Thompson thanking Samuel sincerely for coming in today. "We'll be in touch soon," he assured before shaking hands once more. As Samuel left that office feeling lighter than air, his heart raced wildly, knowing how much this opportunity meant. He glanced down at Shadow, who seemed equally excited, wagging its tail furiously. "Did we do it?" Samuel asked breathlessly, kneeling down beside Shadow, who licked his face happily. "Yes." He laughed amidst tears forming in eyes filled with gratitude. With newfound hope igniting flames within them both, they made their way back home, ready to embrace whatever came next together, a journey towards redemption filled with love, friendship, perseverance, and most importantly, a promise made between two souls forever changed by each other's presence.